Hi, my name is Kelly Milligan. Without dating myself, I will tell you I've been a chef for over 25 years. I will tell you also, without dating myself, I've been a professional singer for longer than that. I thought I was Cher when I was about 8 years old, and it hasn't stopped. David Lindquist has written about a band that I was in the early 2000s that was very popular here in Indianapolis. I've sung with John Mellencamp, Carl Story, Henry Lee Summer, and that's also part of my story, why I'm here. With the food part, I've loved food. I grew up in the kitchen. I'm the oldest of four. My mother taught all of her daughters how to cook and sew and clean, and I love it. What's more important about my story is home. I was born in Germany. I'm an Army baby, but I have lived here for the majority of my life. I have incredible wanderlust, or I did until this year. I went through a painful divorce in the early 2000s, and I had no children with that. And so I was faced with, where can I go? I could go anywhere. I just had to have enough bravery to do it, even though my family thought I was probably completely nuts. I'm very close to my family, and so that was a really hard decision. I had been a chef prior to that for many, many years, but I felt like on a professional level, I needed something a little bit more professional. I needed a business card with my name on it, with my monogram on it, anything that would get me a great job to be able to support myself. Yes, I could go to Sullivan College in Louisville, but that was too close. I had to get out of here. And so I enrolled to Le Cordon Bleu in London, and I had traveled to that city many times, but for those of you who have experienced Europe, traveling is one thing, living as a local is completely different. The city is beautiful, but when you live there as a local and your plane lands and you go into your flat, sight unseen that you found on Craigslist, you get a little scared. And I'm sure for my parents, they're like, what did you do? So I land in London, pick up my keys, open the door. The people who lived there before me must have had a pillow fight, and there were feathers everywhere. And it was about 9 o'clock London time, and I was completely exhausted, and I just cried, and I think I called my mom. But I knew she was going to come to visit me the next week, and we were going to go to school and pick up my knives and pick up my chef jackets, and life would be fine. So I enrolled in school, and I did school, and I did not find a prince to marry me like I wanted, so they kicked me out of the country. The exchange rate was $2.35 per the American dollar, so I was also flat broke. So I came back to Indy with my tail between my legs, completely defeated, and thought, I still have to go get a job, a big girl job. So I did, and I started selling wine for a local wine distributor, and I met some folks from Chateau Ste. Michelle Winery. And for those of you who are familiar with that winery, it's a very popular winery in Woodinville, which is a suburb of Seattle. Again, I'm too pragmatic to just willy-nilly pick up and move. I had to find a job first. So after talking to them, they're like, you would probably love Seattle. So I found a job. I was selling high-end appliances to the elite in Washington State, which we all know that's the majority of the Washington State population, are the extremely elite. And so I loved that job, but I wasn't really cooking. And I explored other options, and I found a job with a company out of Beverly Hills called Big City Chefs. And what they do is they place chefs in the private elite sector to become their private chefs. Sometimes you live with the families or the clients, and sometimes you just do delivery. I happen to do deliveries. One of my biggest clients was the Seahawks, and I cooked for several of their players, including Tavares Jackson, who sadly is no longer with them, and now they're suffering because of that. So I would make meals for him, and several of the other players were living in this beautiful big house, and I always loved when I pulled up and I saw his big fancy car, and he'd show up in his pajamas. I loved it. But Seattle, 1 year turned into 8, and I was tired, and I missed my home. My siblings were having children, and my parents were getting older, and I just felt like my quality of life there, I was very lonely there. So I called my mom on a very stormy day in February of 2015, and I said, I'm ready, and she said, praise God. And she and I drove my entire possessions in a 28-foot Ryder trailer with my car in tow through a snowstorm in Cheyenne, Wyoming with 6 inches of ice on my car. So we pulled up in my driveway about 2:30 in the morning, and I had then also accepted a job here in Indianapolis. God has been so good to put that before me so that I don't just say, hey, I'm home. And it was a sales job, and I hated it, but in December of that year, I was laid off. And so I was like, what do I do now? And I looked on Craigslist for jobs, and that was when Craigslist was extremely safe. And so I found that Gwendolyn Rogers was hiring for bakers at the Cake Bake Shop here in Broad Ripple. And so I'm like, I can do that. So I walked in, she hired me right on the spot, and it was awesome. I was a nighttime baker, which for those of you who have never done a third shift, it's really hard when you're in your mid-40s. And I hated every minute of it, and I cried, but I loved her brand, and I loved working for her, and I had a great time. Till February of that year, like February is like my month, I guess. Till February of that year, I was pursued by a company out of Nashville, Tennessee, to be a tour chef. And to me, that was a job that just resonated with me. I had no idea that these jobs existed. I obviously heavily involved in the music industry and music community. It suited me perfectly. And I thought, somebody's got to feed these people. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, it made perfect sense. And so I accepted that job, and I was Justin Bieber's chef for 9 months that year. And that was a pretty incredible experience. Again, that was very scary as well, because I didn't know my boss, I didn't know the chefs. All I knew is my plane was going to take me to Eugene, Oregon, and they were going to drop me off, and I had 5 pieces of pink and white polka-dotted luggage, and somebody was going to pick me up, and they were going to take me away, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but it was a legitimate job, and the runner came and got me and took me to the venue, and I became Justin Bieber's chef with a crew of people. It wasn't just me. I lived on a tour bus. I had my own bunk on the bottom floor of a tour bus. It's usually set in 3s. It's not a glamorous job by any means. I often worked 18, 19 hours a day. Artists can be very, very picky. The one thing I loved about it was I went from a commercial kitchen to a kitchen that was a semi-truck that was completely converted into a commercial kitchen. So if any of you have ever been to Banker's Life and you go on the back entrance, not the one on Pennsylvania, during a show, you will most likely see a commercial kitchen, and it's usually one of my old companies that's sitting there in a big semi. And that's how we cooked. And we shuttle the food down to Banker's Life. Every venue has a dining room, and it's beautiful, and it's usually white tablecloths, and that's something that you guys probably don't know. Ruoff is the same. There's a beautiful dining room, and that's where we feed the artists. So I started touring, and I switched companies in between all of this. I ended up with another company out of Seattle that I completely loved, and I worked for artists like Hall & Oates. John Oates is one of my biggest fans. I make a bread pudding out of leftover donuts. And when I was at Ruoff 2 years ago, he stopped me and he said, who made that bread pudding? Is that made out of donuts? I'm like, I did. He's like, oh my God, chef, that's the most amazing thing. So fast forward a few months later when I'm out in Seattle for the same show, and he recognizes this donut bread pudding, and he says, who made this bread pudding? And he looks over, and it's me. I have cooked for Rob Zombie. I've cooked for Journey. I've cooked for a band called Asia. I've done Metallica. I have worked for Earth, Wind & Fire. I have worked for numerous, Jay-Z and Beyonce. I've worked for numerous artists. And it has been an incredible experience to do that. One of the craziest things people ask me is, tell me about the artist, like what do they eat? Justin Bieber is strictly turkey sandwiches. He is not an adventurous eater. He eats in his dressing room. He would come into the dining room maybe twice. He loved cheese balls, so that's what he would come and get. The most adventurous band I ever cooked for was the band Foreigner. They're around my age, a little bit older, and they're all foodies now. Their singer is a very well-known foodie. He won the Chopped version of Celebrity Chopped, and so he and I are very good friends, and I remember he came into my semi-truck kitchen one day, and he was kind of like telling me what to do, and I'm like, dude, you got to decide, are you a rock star or a chef, because you can't be both, and he's like, but you are, and I was like, yeah, fair enough. So anyway, so the touring thing, last summer I was on the Imagine Dragons tour. And again, I'm out in Seattle with this company, touring all over the US. We only did US and Canada, we did not do Europe. But I think last summer was the pivotal moment when I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I was so tired, and it was a beautiful day like it was today, and I'm laying in this beautiful hotel room, and I was so tired I couldn't even leave the bed, and I thought, I have been to every single city I could possibly imagine. Not once, not twice. I don't remember what day it was. I don't remember half the time what year it is, and I miss my family, but I wasn't gonna give it up. It's a fabulous job, and to be able to do it for a living is incredible, and there are days when I really, really miss it. I do miss it, because I could watch any artist from the side of a stage at any time. I have a suitcase that remained packed every time I'd come home. I'd come home for 4 weeks at a time, and I'd leave my suitcase packed, and my mom would say, it makes me so sad when you leave. And it made me sad to do that, but I still had to keep that packed because I had to leave at a moment's notice. So this winter rolled around. I came home for Christmas from off the Imagine Dragons tour and several other shows in the state of Washington and Portland, and we did California as well. And I brought all my luggage back, and my parents took us on a cruise for Christmas, and again, I didn't unpack. So I knew I had to leave mid-February, again, to start KISS and an R&B artist called Travis Scott. And that was still looming in my head. I was home long enough. 2 months at home is a very long time when you're on tour. You get very comfortable. You start to enjoy Sunday dinners. You start to spend time with your family, and you know that if you get on that plane, it's going to be that much harder. So February rolled around, mid-February, and the snowstorms hit Seattle for the first time in 20 years. And I had a flight, a one-way ticket, back out to Seattle to start KISS and be on a 2-week leg of Metallica, and then be on the road with Travis Scott for close to 6 months. And I think subconsciously I was not ready to do that. But I had to go. It was my job. I didn't have any other options, and I certainly didn't want to quit. And my flight was canceled not once but twice in 48 hours. And so I kind of had to look at that. I'm a very faithful person. I look at signs, and I follow what's in my heart, and I knew there's got to be a reason why I'm here. Well, right in between that time, in that 48 hours, again, Gwendolyn Rogers of Cake Bake had emailed me, and she and I had kept in touch over the years, and when I was in town, I'd say, hey, you know, I'm home, you know, want to bring a cake for Cheap Trick? She'd be like, yeah, sure. And she'd always check in every once in a while, but she emailed me on Facebook Messenger, which I hardly ever use. And she just said, hey, girl, are you on the road? And I typed back, actually, I'm supposed to be, but I'm laying in bed, and my flight's been canceled. And she said, I would love to talk to you. She said, I have been thinking about you a lot, and I think I have a good opportunity for you, and I was interested to see if you would like to talk to me. And so I'm like, sure. I got in my car, and I drove over to what is now the Carmel location of that shop, and I spoke to her. And really in less than 48, 72 hours, she had offered me the job that I have now. And what that represents to me is, and I'm eternally grateful to her, because I didn't know how much I missed my home. I didn't know how much I missed my bed. I didn't know how much I missed my cat. I didn't know how much I missed my family. And it is so nice. It was so nice after I accepted that job to unpack that suitcase. And I guess for me, what I want to say is that my life has come full circle, that home is the most important place of all. And I'm so grateful to God that I was able to see so much after my divorce, not thinking, even knowing what the heck I was going to do with my life, and to be able to see all that I've been able to do in cities that I could only possibly dream of seeing. And I will close with this. I have one of my one of my little chefs here tonight, and I just want to say to her, she's an amazing person. And she's caught on very quickly. And if there's one thing I can say, girl, is follow your dream. I don't know if you're going to be a chef or not, but follow your dream and never let anybody tell you no. And if you have drive and spirit in your heart, I don't care if there's people out here who are in their late 40s or 50s. I was in my late 30s when all of this stuff started, and I felt like my age was keeping me back, and it's truly just a number. Write that book, take that class, change that job, go somewhere, go travel, live in Europe, go to New York, live as a local for weeks at a time. Just live your dream, because you will be taken on an incredible journey that you never ever thought you would ever be on. So, thank you.